Solomon University. I ran the catering company there. I spent years as a food and beverage director for a country club. I've done all kind of stuff. I've done private cooking classes for folks. Um, but all the time since I have been in HMR, and I'm just like all of you all, I've been in this program. I've lost 100 pounds. I gained 50 pounds back. I'm losing weight again. So, I mean, I've been up and down on the scale with you all. And the biggest thing is that so often you get bored with the foods that you're eating, or when you come into this program, when they start talking about shifting everything down on the level, down to the fruits and vegetables, off of all the higher fat foods that you've eaten, a lot of times people don't have any idea. For them, a fruit and vegetable meant broccoli and french fries. And that's really all that they've had exposure to, or canned corn, or canned peas, or those kinds of things. Now, I'm not trying to make anybody in here feel like that they don't know or haven't had or don't have exposure to. I'm not making that assessment about anyone. And I'm also not making the assumption that anyone is already a big cook or that you aren't one. And anything that are on those sheets that I set in there, they may say Traci's rules for this or that. I break my own rules all the time. So I am certainly, you ask any chef to tell you something, and you get 10 chefs and they'll tell you 12 different ways to cut an onion or to roast a vegetable or things to do. So all I'm trying to do today is maybe open up an exposure for you to things you haven't seen or done before or knew that you could even think about doing, and give you some maybe new options for ways to do it. And so that's all this is today. It's just suggestions for you. If you can leave here with 2 or 3 things that were something new that you didn't do before or hadn't ever thought of or tried, then it's been a success for us. You certainly can ask questions, and you can ask them while I'm doing things. If I should say to you, just hold on, I'll get to that, I really will, as we go along the way. So hopefully I don't want to offend anybody if I say, just give me a minute, we'll get to that. But please feel free if you've got questions to ask along the way. I think to start with, the biggest thing is that I asked them to put this packet together in a particular way because I thought that there were some straight up rules about roasting vegetables. Now, I'll go back a little bit and say, we're talking about roasting really here. And you can roast vegetables any time of year, even if you're thinking about the fact that, oh my gosh, here comes summertime and I'm gonna get the kitchen all hot and everything. Why wouldn't I want to steam something? Why wouldn't I want to grill something? Why wouldn't I want to boil something? I'm not taking anything away from any of those other options. But the fact is that we are now starting to eat so many vegetables in this program, and by roasting them, you're getting flavors from them that you would not get ever from boiling them or from steaming them. Those are moist cooking methods. And you can't do any caramelization of the natural sugars that are in your vegetables. You can't get it. Now, between those methods, I prefer to steam things, and you can get nice little steamer baskets. You can buy them for $3.99 at the Aldi when they have them in, or just about anywhere to put in your own pans and put your vegetables in. Add a little bit of water down at the bottom. It certainly is quicker to do than boiling because you only have to have a little bit of water that has to boil for you. But your vegetables aren't going to get any additional color to them because there's no caramelization that can occur. Your greens will be greener, that kind of thing, but you can't do things to them. Boiling, again, to me, if you were going to take a vegetable and do something else to it, that's when you need to boil it. Meaning, if I was going to take a head of cauliflower and I was going to turn it into a sauce, I might want to boil it so that I can get it good and cooked through for me. I'm not worried about it being crispy, roasted, any of those things, because I'm going to throw it in the food processor and warm it up, and I want it to be nice and smooth for me. But for the most part, when you boil things, all the nutrients and a lot of the flavor and even colors on things are going to leach out into whatever the liquid is that you have in the pan. Now, you certainly can add flavor to foods in the boiling process by not using water. And that's one of the biggest things I tell people. When a recipe says put something in water, if I can, now other than maybe a pasta, but anything else, if it's rice, carrots, when I boil barley, farro, wild rice, I use a broth. I want to add flavor to things, and water takes flavor away from things. So you can use wine, you can use fortified wines, you might be able to add some of your Traci syrups to a liquid. You know, like say if you were doing carrots, think about adding some burnt sugar or caramel Traci syrup to your liquid, and you will infuse that flavor into your carrots that you're boiling. So water to me is something that takes away from. I always tell people, I even use my leftover coffee to cook with. It's one of my big secrets in making my chili. I have coffee in there as part of the liquid. I wouldn't put water in my chili and water down all that time that I've spent browning the meat and adding in the tomatoes and layering the different spices in and toasting them in my skillet with the onion and the beef. I use coffee to bring flavor into it. People people look at it and they go, "This is really good. Why is it different?" Well, again, I always want to add flavor and not take it away. So we decided to use roasting really in this class for the most part because it adds so much flavor to your vegetables versus taking things away. And you can roast frozen vegetables as well as you can roast fresh vegetables. And a lot of people don't realize that. They think when they come into a program like this or when they're starting to try and cook healthy that it costs them more money to do it. And if you're going for fresh vegetables, oftentimes that's one of the more expensive things that's showing up in your grocery basket. But, excuse me, I have a bit of a cold, so my voice might go along the way here. Frozen vegetables are actually picked when they are at their peak of ripeness, and they are individually quick frozen at the time that they are picked. So you're getting every bit of the same nutrient in there. If you read the labels on the back of them, most of the time it may have a bit of a preservative, but if it says, frozen beets, it's beets that are in there. You don't want to buy a frozen vegetable that has some sort of sauce or something added to it, oil and butter and all these different seasonings. You can do that yourself. But a frozen vegetable is going to save you money, and you can roast with them, you can do anything with them. And we'll talk about it as we go along. But some of the biggest things with roasting, and they're like what I call housekeeping rules. Roasting is high temperature, 400 degrees or higher. You're just baking something along the way at 350 if you turn your oven onto that. I have found that the more and more I do of this, I'm minimum 400, 425 on things, and I'm at 450 for a lot of things. You want a good high temperature because you're trying to sear the outside of things and still leave them nice and soft on the inside. But get a good sear for them on the outside. So get your temperatures up. Pans. You want to prepare your pans. And one of the biggest things that I find that people do is they don't have enough roasting pans for the things that they're trying to do. You overcrowd your pans and put too much stuff on them. Go out, right now, Target has a sale on half sheet pans. I think they're 11 something. You can buy quarter sheet pans, which is, half of this. I think they're 9 something right now. But buy big sheet pans. And I use them, I have like 5 of these. And I'll spend a day when I am meal prepping for myself, And while things are in the oven, I'm prepping and cutting the vegetables to go on the other pans to go in there. Just keep them with foil. Do I use a lot of foil at my house? I do, but I also, after I've roasted something, I will take a paper towel and wet it and just wipe it off and use it again. So I don't use a new piece of foil for every time I roast. You know, you can keep things clean. You can use parchment. The problem that I have with parchment, and I brought some in, for one thing, the stuff that's available to us as consumers to buy, which is different than what's available to a chef. For chef, they get sheets of parchment that fit. This is what, two of these together. This is a half sheet pan for professional chefs. This is a full sheet pan, would be two of these together. And we get boxes of parchment that would fit a full sheet pan and fit in there. We can't buy that as individuals just at the grocery store. You end up with either something like this that doesn't fit, okay, or you're using two of them and trying to make them fit in there, or you get the stuff on the thing here, and I just tried, just like you guys have, you pull this stuff out and get it, and you figure out how to get it to keep it from rolling around. I've tried pamming it in the corners to hold it down. I've tried running my fingers along the way to do. You certainly can use parchment, but it's not reusable. You're not going to be able to, when you use it, you're going to use it one time and toss it. And I think it's just a pain in the butt. Really, to work with. I don't think, for a home cook that doesn't have access to the professional stuff, I think it doesn't help you any.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
When you cook with parchment as opposed to the
Yes.
foil, what about the cooking times? Does the foil
Doesn't
cook
change.
faster? It doesn't?
No, doesn't change. And people say all the time, well, there's a shiny side to foil and there's a dull side to foil. Which side should be up or down? It has the shiny and the dull is strictly a part of the processing when Reynolds made this stuff and took two sheets and had to press them together, because if they didn't, particularly with heavy duty foil, it would tear as you were trying to pull it off the rolls. And so there's no difference one way or the other. If somebody's ever told you, make sure the shiny side's up, or your grandmother said, oh, make sure the dull side's, there is no difference in the overall scheme of things which side you have it going. It's not going to change anything. So I just think that foil's easier, and you can wipe it and get more than one use out of it. But most people overcrowd your pans. You put too much stuff on them, and at that point you're not roasting anymore, you're steaming. Because by the time you put stuff on top of one another, everything that's underneath is going to steam. It's never going to get crisp and caramelized on the outside of it. So it's better to put less on the pans and have two pans. You can put them in your oven at the same time, two different shelves. At the halfway point when you're going to take stuff out and toss it anyway, put them back in the opposite way. The one that was on the top, put it on the bottom. Just reverse them in there. If you don't know how your ovens run, learn. Most people should have a pretty good idea of where the hot spots are in their ovens. And if you know that the back right corner of your oven's hot, turn your pan when you take it out the halfway point and toss things around. Flip your pan around when you stick it back in there. So foil's easy, pans are easy. Make sure you have plenty of pans. I actually, when I take my vegetables out of the oven, I like to take them off of. I keep an extra pan sitting over there with foil on it that is cold, or at room temperature, because if I let my vegetables come out of the oven and sit on that pan, they're going to keep cooking. And one of my big things is, particularly for anything that has to do with prep, I undercook my vegetables. And in the sheets that you have there are times that are given from something you cook from 12 minutes to 18 minutes. I tend to cook it if it's something I'm gonna make and store in my refrigerator and have for the week and do it on the weekends and be able to pull it out and just use it in something else. I undercook it because I'm gonna heat it again later in the week. So I don't want to cook it till it is done, because by the time I use it again in the week and take it out, it's gonna be mush. So there's another little trick for you. Undercook those things that you're gonna make ahead and store. If it's something you're making for right that night and you're gonna serve it all, fine, cook it till it's done the way you want it to be. But I keep the extra pan there because I'll just slide the whatever I was cooking off of the hot pan onto the cool pan to start it cooling down quicker, so that it doesn't sit there and continue to cook on that hot pan even if I've taken it out of the oven. The other thing I would suggest is that if you are doing this kind of meal prep where you're cooking these things ahead of time, you're taking it out, you've now taken the time to put it on a separate pan to let it cool down. Let it come to room temperature before you put it in a container and put it in the refrigerator. Because if you don't, and you put it in there warm to start with, all it's gonna do, the condensation that's in there is you're gonna take everything you've done to crisp that up and turn it into steam. Again, inside of whatever it is that you cooked. Now, I find for me, I prep ahead of time, and on the weekends I'll have squash and zucchini together. I'll do peppers and onions together. I do mushrooms. I might do fennel or broccoli or artichoke hearts. And I keep those in my refrigerator during the week. Spaghetti squash. I keep them in the refrigerator during the week. So on any given night, I can decide if I'm going to have a stir fry on a given night and do it with the savory chicken entree. I can pull out some onions and peppers together. If I want them a little smaller than the way I'm going to show you I do them, I can chop them up. I can throw some mushrooms together. I can take some already done coleslaw mix, put all these things in a pan, in a saute pan or in a wok, get those suckers going, reheat them, and so they're going to cook a little more. That's why I undercooked them on the front end. And then add my entree in, and Traci's Asian sauce that has gone everywhere around this program. I think most people should have it, and if you don't, it'll come up in sauce class when we get to that. And all of a sudden you've got these vegetables again. Or if you've prepped something ahead of time in the week, all you have to do is turn your oven back on, take out the portion you want, put it back on a pan, and throw it back in the oven for 2, 3, 4 minutes. It will re-crisp it, re-bring it up. But if you've let it sit there and put it into your container when it was still hot and it's steamed, it's going to be hard to get that crispness back again that you want. Now I will say, vegetables are loaded in water. And I've had people say to me, okay, I prepped this stuff on Sunday, I put it in my container, I've used it Monday and Tuesday, and here comes Thursday, and I've got a bunch of liquid down in here. It's gone bad. What am I going to do? It has not gone bad. The weight of the vegetable that's been pushing on itself inside of your container, the liquid's just leaching out of the vegetable. All you have to do, by any stretch, and I do it all the time, this container could, by the end of a week, have water up to here in it. It's just the liquid from the vegetable. You can actually save it if you want to in a container and throw it in your vegetable soup. And later on, it's great flavoring. It's got all the flavor of your vegetable in it. Or all you have to do, you can take it and just drain it out if you don't want to worry about keeping it. Your vegetable, there's nothing wrong with it. It is not old. And I have had, as I say, people say to me, I've prepped all this food, and by the time I got to later in the week, it had all gone bad. It had all this liquid in there. I had to throw it out. I'm like, are you crazy? There's nothing wrong with it. So just keep that in mind, that whatever's in there is just the liquid coming out of your vegetable. Yeah.
When you go to reheat your vegetables,
Uh-huh.
you have to use an oven or can you use a microwave?
Well, Depends on what you want. Your microwave is never gonna crisp it. Now, you want it quick, and I do that all the time. I'll take this vegetable, that vegetable, some of this, some of that, put it in a bowl, throw an entree on top of it, throw it in the microwave, and a minute later it's hot, and I'm ready to eat. Absolutely. That's the fastest way to be able to eat. It's the fastest way to take a box and take food with you when you're going to somebody's house. Put some vegetables in a pan, take it to go, take your entree with you, and you can either put it in there ahead of time and just heat them together, or heat your vegetables up for 2 minutes, heat your entree for a minute, lay it over the top of it. I've lived through this program doing that.
When you prepare all your vegetables
Mhm.
and so forth, and you put it in your container,
Mhm.
I can run for like 7 to 10 days.
Again, it depends on the vegetable. It really does depend on the vegetable. Some vegetables will they'll be breaking down. They won't hurt you to go 7 to 10 days. Will they be as appealing is the question on that kind of thing. I try not to prep stuff out for more than a week at a time. And sometimes it might be actually 5 days. But sometimes that has to do with how quick am I eating certain things at one time. And 7 to 10 days, it's nothing about what you've done is going to make you sick, but it may not be as appealing at that point as it would have been. Okay, the other thing, real quick, before we get into these individuals, is that when people go to roast things, there are ways you can do this, several ways you can do it, and not any one of them is right, wrong, indifferent. I think it has to do with what do you plan to do with it on the back end you have to think about. You could take a pan and put all kind of vegetables on it at the same time. Throw them in the oven. If you didn't stop and think, well, peppers are going to roast at a different time than my carrots are going to roast, as my parsnips are going to roast, as my Brussels sprouts are going to roast, you're going to pull them out, and some things are going to be overdone and some things aren't going to be done. So I like to individually tend to roast things, or roast things that I call that they marry well together. I roast like peppers and onions together on a pan, because I find that particularly for meal prep, I can put them in a container and keep them for the week, and I'll show you in a minute. I tend to cut them in strips, because then I'm ready to use them in a stir fry, if I want it to be Mexican, whatever. If I need them to be a different shape, smaller, I can give them a quick chop before I throw them in. I will cook my zucchini squash and yellow squash together. I cook my mushrooms separate. I cook my artichokes separate. I cook my Brussels sprouts separate. I cook my fennel separate. I just do all that stuff on its own pans. And then, depends on the vegetable. Every vegetable has a different cooking time for it to be either crisp tender, on the front end, or cooked all the way through, based on the density of the vegetable. If it's a hard vegetable, a soft vegetable, and as well, how you cut it. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So you can either do them individually in pans, so you know that if you've got peppers and onions, you're going to do this and you're doing it for meal prep. I'm going to do it for about 9 minutes, 9 or 10 minutes. Pull it out. If I wanted it to be cooked all the way, 15 minutes. For the most part, they'll be done where I need them to be. Brussels sprouts, I do them, 15 minutes, lay them down, take them out, toss them or turn them over, and then in again for another 15 minutes. So they all have different times and temperatures, or not temperatures, they all have different times for them to cook.
When roasting your vegetables,
Mm-hmm.
particularly when you want to toss them or
Mm-hmm.
take them out, have problems with them sticking to the aluminum foil.
Pam.
Okay.
Pam, here, before you put them down, put the Pam on. either the Pam here or the new spritzer bottle. And I like the spray to do my pans with. I like the new spritzer bottle to do my vegetables with. So I do them individually, or I do them to the ones that match each other up together, or the other way you can do it is to do them in stages, where you put the ones that are going to take the longest to cook on the pan first and put those in the oven. And you have all the other ones ready to go, and you open the oven up and you add them in at each time. So that at the end of the thing, you've got, your 5 different vegetables. You've got your squash and your zucchini and your peppers and your onions and your tomatoes and some mushrooms and all these things in a thing together. And you think, okay, now I've got 1 pan stuffed instead of having 5 pans of stuff. Yeah, but every time you open the door on your oven, you're letting heat out. And by the time, some of those things, you're only letting it go back in for 3 or 4 minutes where you're opening it again, putting something else in. As I say, it's not wrong. Is it the best way to do? Probably not, but it isn't wrong. And if that's the way you want to do it and want to and like it, art on the walls in a museum, you couldn't give it to me, some of it, but somebody is famous for that. So it's just up to you. I'm just trying to give you what I think are better suggestions for you to have control of your food as compared to letting the oven or the food control you. So we've done that. Don't overcrowd the pan. Cut things in uniform sizes. If you're going to cook it together, cut it together. And no, you do not have to stand there with some sort of a measure. Nobody's going to have a ruler next to you to do. But if you got big chunks of stuff and little chunks of stuff, they're not going to cook at the same time. Something's going to be overdone and something's going to be underdone. So just try to keep things the same of whatever it is that you're cooking, uniform in size. So that takes us off the first page. We go to the next page. And those next 2 pages, I have put together for you a vegetable chart of specific vegetables that tell you what the vegetable is, in what state I'm talking about it being, whether it's frozen or fresh, how you're going to cut it typically, and what the typical at a 425 to 450 degree oven amount of time approximately it's going to take to cook something. Now, please don't come back to me later on and say, I cooked mine at 450 and it was done. You said it was going to take 30 minutes, and mine, it was burnt. It was done in 20 minutes. You know your own ovens. I don't know your ovens. I don't know how hot or cold they cook. I don't know how long they take to cook. I know little countertop ovens heat up and put out more heat actually than big ovens do. Less space. Doesn't have as much space. So if I'm cooking something in my counter oven, because I have a little countertop oven besides my regular oven, if I go 425, same item, takes less time in the small oven, more confined space, the heat's on it, than in a bigger oven, the heat's not on it as much. So you have to kind of play with this a little bit. I'm just giving you suggested guidelines to work from here. And the other thing that I have done is tried to break vegetables down into what I call wet vegetables versus dry vegetables. Wet vegetable being by the time you cut it and have it be like a pepper, like a squash or a zucchini. When you cut into that, it's moist, it's wet. When you put that on your tray, if you are going to season it ahead of time, I don't think you need to add extra Pam to it, because the wetness of the vegetable will hold whatever seasoning you need. If it's a dry vegetable, like cabbage or a head of cauliflower, that's when You might need to spray it with some Pam if you're going to then add a seasoning to it. So that's just giving you, to think about the fact that you may not have to use Pam for every single vegetable that you're doing. I also, within this wet and dry, have given you the suggestion of certain vegetables, in particularly artichoke hearts and broccoli and cauliflower, that you can do from the frozen state. Now that does not mean that you can't do corn from frozen and roast it, the fact that I don't have it on here. If I tried to create a list of every vegetable and everything you could do, Chuck would kill me. And trying to print and have all that. I've tried to get to the heart of some things here. But the fact is, sometimes cauliflower can be real expensive in the store to get fresh ones. And even though Aldi always has the best prices, if you didn't know that, on cauliflower. And I'll shop there just to buy cauliflower. But you can use frozen cauliflower. Frozen state. Take it frozen out of the oven. Throw it on a pan, the florets, and throw it in the oven. And it will roast and crisp up. That is exactly what I did with these artichoke hearts. This happens to be the Trader Joe's version of frozen artichoke hearts. And they come quartered already, and I literally take them frozen, throw them on a sheet pan. Now, because I'm a little anal retentive on things and have a little bit of OCD, I think it's easier for me. I do this with my Brussels sprouts. I do it with my artichoke hearts. I stand them all up like little soldiers, going the same way. And they're in little rows, because I find I can get more stuff on there. And I'm a control freak, and I have to control how it all looks, and it has to be perfect, That is why I go to OA. Really, I'm trying to learn to lose this concept of that I can control anything, because I can. And the concept of perfection, because nothing has to be perfect, none of us are. But I will take my artichoke hearts frozen and line them up like little soldiers here, go them one way. I throw them in the 425-degree oven. I let them cook for about 15 minutes. I pull them out, and then, because I've done this for a long time and my fingers, it doesn't matter, you can take a spatula and start turning them over and whatever. But because, of course, my OCD, I sit there and flip every one of them over. So that instead, they've all been face up. Now they're all face down, and back in they go. That way I know every single one of them is getting cooked just right. And I do the same thing with Brussels sprouts. But these, I will promise you, if you will do this with your artichoke hearts, they become like popcorn. When you take these suckers out of the oven and they are hot, first of all, they're addictive. But the thing about that is, they say there's 3.5, or there's 4 servings in a bag of this. 25 calories a serving. You can eat the whole bag. So, if you're worried about having a 100-calorie thing of popcorn, let me tell you, have a 100-calorie bag of artichoke hearts. You're going to get a lot more fiber and good things for you and to work from. But these work great. I love them. And I keep roasted artichoke hearts around. I tend to not put anything on my vegetables except a little salt, little pepper, maybe some of the Trader Joe's 21 Salute seasoning blend when I roast them, when I'm doing it out for prep. Reason being, if I went ahead and put Italian seasoning on everything, then I gotta eat Italian all week with those vegetables. Thursday might come and I want my Mexican food. Well, if I had cooked them as prep form with nothing on them, Then I can decide on a given night, I'm having Jamaican jerk tonight, or I'm having Indian, or I'm going to eat Asian food or whatever. I can season it on the night of, instead of trying to then overcome all the thyme I put on something, or the rosemary I already put on something, or the smoked paprika I already put on something, to get it to now become, Greek food or something. So that is one of my things. Now, if I'm fixing something that is going to be right for that night, and I'm going to eat it that night, I'd use whatever seasoning I want. So when I put those down, the first go around on it, but these are wet. You don't have to spray anything on them because they're frozen. You can sprinkle whatever you want on them, throw them in the oven, take them out halfway through, give them a toss, or turn them all over, and put them back in again for 10 or 15 minutes. Pull them out, and then again, have a second pan sitting there, and just toss them on there and give them a shake. Spread them out again, so they're not sitting on all just in a clump in there, steaming, and losing the effect of everything you just spent your time doing. So artichoke hearts are a really, really great thing to work from. Have I done them from the can? Yes. It's more expensive. You get way more of them for about the same price of a can in one of the bags of quartered artichoke hearts. And I think they taste more like an actual artichoke heart than something that's been in a can with a bunch of brine on it, or a jar, either one of them. And then you're worried about that's got so much liquid in it, and you're having to squeeze that out to get them on. So frozen artichoke hearts, if you haven't found them. Trader Joe's and Kroger, I know have them. I've never looked, I don't know if Walmart has them, and I've never looked at Meijer, so I can't answer that for you. Okay, there you go. All right, next one. Broccoli, cauliflower. Again, both of them. I didn't bring broccoli here today at all. Because everybody's already done broccoli. But frozen, you can absolutely take it frozen from the bag. Throw it on the sheet pan. You don't have to add any spray to it. If you want to season it great, you don't have to. Throw it in the oven. Cook it for about 12, 15 minutes. Take it out, shake it, or use a spatula and turn it over, throw it back in, and finish it again. Pull it out, it's ready to go. Same thing with frozen cauliflower. I'm going to wait and do the other cauliflower when I get on the dry side. Mushrooms. Now, first of all, most people, or some people, I'm not going to say most people, some people are not little cremini mushrooms here. These are the same thing as a portobello. They're just babies, if you didn't know that. If these were allowed to grow up, it would become a portobello mushroom. So same thing. White mushroom versus brown mushroom. Brown mushrooms have a little more flavor. White mushrooms are just fine if that's what you like. Use them. You can use those for these. I tend to go for things that can give me a little more flavor. Now, it is very, very rare for me to take a mushroom and just slice it into slices. Because first of all, they are loaded in water and they shrink up to nothing when you cook them, whether you're sauteing, roasting, whatever you're doing. I try to do food that the integrity of the finished product stays as close to the original product to start with that it was. Zucchini, mushrooms. You will not see me cut those in just in round circles. You won't see me cut mushrooms really in slices because there's no texture left to it. When you go to bite into it, that little thin thing is all shrunk up and there's nothing left. I am a big proponent of quartering mushrooms so that when you're finished, in fact, when you're finished, food is supposed to look pretty besides taste good. And food, you eat with your eyes on your plate. So, I roasted these mushrooms day before yesterday. And I quartered them. Or, if it's a great big mushroom, this guy might go into 9 pieces, 6 or 9 pieces. Cut it, twice one way and twice the other way. So that when you go to put it into something and you bite it, you actually get a bite of the mushroom. You get flavor in there. You've got something. It's not just this little thin nothing that's gone away and all that disintegrated into whatever you're doing. Plus, on a plate, when food sits up, think about chefs when you eat out. They try to always put height on a plate because it looks prettier. They don't like everything to lay flat. They'll put the rice and all this and then put your chicken breast on top of it. They build things up. So the fact is if you've got quartered mushrooms instead of little flat mushrooms, it's more height on the plate. So it's a visually a better experience for you, let alone the fact that when you bite into it, you've got a piece that you're biting into to work from. Now, again, I take my mushrooms, I simply quarter them, eighth them, ninth them, sixth them. If they're little tiny ones that are in there, cut them just in half. Again, I'm trying to make them all be roughly the same size, and I sit and throw them on a pan. Now, I will say this about mushrooms. You don't have to spray the pan at all on those guys because they have so much liquid that it's going to extrude. And the biggest crime that I could ever see someone do is to take all your mushrooms that you cut up, have a pan full of them, and this is one time when I will even overload my own pan. I'll take 2 boxes of these at a time, cut them all up, throw them on the pan, I throw them into the oven, I cook them for about 18 minutes, and I don't even worry about shaking them, doing anything with them. And all that, Oh, well, I tend to cut them off. I will on the front end just take them and cut the end of it off. And so that they're roughly flat out here. And again, because mushrooms are grown in dirt, it depends. If I want to keep it and throw it into soup or use it for stock later on, I keep the skins on onions. I actually will cut onions. If I'm making a vegetable stock, leave the skin on it when I'm cooking the stock. I don't take the skin off. It has flavor, it has color. It provides all of that in there. But for a lot of people, they're going to cut those off. They're not going to keep them. They'll throw them away. As a chef, you learn because of food costs in your restaurant. You want to use every piece of everything that you can. And I have all kinds of little baggies in my freezer. It's little baggies of this, little baggies of that, that I use when I'm turning around and have a bunch of chicken bones and want to throw it in and make a stock. Or if I'm making a vegetable stock, I have all these little scraps and pieces of stuff that I'll throw in.
While you're on the subject of mushrooms,
Yeah.
in a container,
Yeah.
what's the proper storage? I mean, because like I bought some and put my mushrooms on a roasted cauliflower pizza that I made, and I didn't use the whole box. And the box is sitting in the refrigerator, and then they kind of feel like they got a little slimy.
Well,
And I don't know if that's wrong. Is that normal? Are they not good to eat?
well, it depends on how long you left them sitting in there to get slimy. Typically, I find that if I've opened a box of mushrooms, I didn't use them all, and I throw them in like this, they don't get slimy, they get dry. They start to shrivel all dried out. For the most part, vegetables are even off the vine, off the stalk. They are living, breathing things. They do not like to be closed up inside of some sort of unbreathable plastic bag. Think about your spinach and how it starts to get all wilty. inside or the classic one. Everybody that buys a bag of chopped lettuce every week when you go to the grocery store, because it's the one that you're gonna leave in the refrigerator and toss out at the end of the week. And you have to replace it every week. And it wouldn't be a week's shopping if you hadn't gotten the one that you're gonna have to toss out. Vegetables are living, breathing things. The way you see them in the grocery store is how you should store them. The grocery store spends a ton of money on those items and want them to look nice. So if it's potatoes that are sitting out and not refrigerated, don't go home and put them in the refrigerator. Tomatoes are sitting out. They aren't refrigerated. Don't go put them in the refrigerator. Your carrots are in the refrigerated section. Your peppers tend to be in the refrigerated, for the most part. Now they have sales, and they stick them out on those great big bins and the like. But the way the items are packaged and stored in the grocery store is how you should store them at home. Little trick there.
What about clean mustard? Water, no water?
Okay, when I went to culinary school years ago, we were taught, we took a paper towel, you got it damp, and you individually cleaned the mushrooms. You stemmed them, you cleaned them, you spent all this time making love to the mushrooms. And they're loaded in water, and you were told, don't put those in a colander and just rinse them under in the sink. Don't rinse them under there. You're putting all this water in them. There are two super wonderful, what I call food scientific websites. One is Cooks Illustrated, or America's Test Kitchen, and the other is Serious Eats. Both of them have completely, in recent years, debunked that entire thing. You can go ahead and rinse those suckers underwater. Now, you're not going to put them in a bowl of water and let them sit there. But you can take a colander, put your mushrooms in there, use your hands to go under, get the dirt off of them, because you're not adding that much liquid that either in a roasting pan or on a saute pan, you aren't going to cook out of it anyway. Think about mushrooms, how much liquid they extrude that comes out of them when you're cooking them. If you're making beef stew or something, and you're cooking the mushrooms down with the onions and everything, all this liquid that's coming out, and they say, let that kind of evaporate some. Well, when you're roasting your mushrooms, and you get to the end of the process, you cook them where you want them to be. I take my pan out, I sit it on top, and I sit it up against something where I let it sit at an angle. And I use a spatula and pull all the little roasted mushrooms up to one end. And I let all this juice come down to the bottom, whatever's down there. For these mushrooms yesterday, or the day before I guess, I only ended up with about this much. Sometimes I get more. During the week, any liquid that comes off of them. Keep it. Don't throw this away. This is now, it's truly like mushroom broth, mushroom stock. You can throw it into any dish you're making, sauce you're making, chili you're making, chicken dish you're making, stock you're making, soup you're making. I use it, I keep a container of that in my fridge each week, and if I'm stir frying vegetables, if instead I don't want to open up a new container of some chicken broth, and I'm stir frying stuff and I'm going to add in my savory chicken entree to it, I use this in the wok as my steam after I have gotten my vegetables kind of done, and I'll throw everything in, add some of that mushroom broth in, put a lid on it, sit there and let it sit for a minute or two to steam now the cabbage and everything down, ready to go. This is liquid gold. Don't throw it away. It's going to help you build flavor into other things.
Is there a difference between the word stock and broth? I really get confused on that.
stock tends to be a more highly concentrated version than a broth. When you start taking bones and roasting them in an oven, and then pre-cooking your bone, as I say, roasting the bones, putting in a big pot, adding in a bunch of vegetables again for flavor, your spices in a bouquet garni that you tied up to go in there, and then you add liquid into it, and you let that all cook down. Then you're going to strain everything out of it. These more concentrated, oftentimes people will then take that and reduce it even further. That is where you get these rich, flavorful stocks. If you've just got a chicken carcass and you throw that in with some water and you just cover it up with water and you cook that and you do it one time and you do it for 20 minutes and you extract just a little bit of stuff, that's a broth. It really has to do more with the intensity of what the finished product is. But as far as marketing purposes go within the store, most of the time, the broth that you see in a packaged can versus the stock you see in a packaged can were both done the same way, but they can ask for 30 cents more for the stock because you think it's a better thing than just the broth. But they really haven't spent the time doing it that you would do at home. So, yes.
You said roasted the bone?
Yeah, people, when you're making a beef stock or a veal stock, those kinds of things, they'll take the bones, they'll take certain bones, and put them on a sheet pan, and literally roast the bones in the oven to caramelize any leftover tendons or meat or anything that's on it. Chefs will even take tomato paste and put that over the top of the bones, brush it on, and put that in to let that roast, and then they'll chicken bones, veal bones, beef bones, they'll take it out, put it in big stock pots then with their mirepoix, which is carrots and onions and celery, their flavoring agents, garlic, and then their bouquet garni, which is again flavoring herbs, and put those in, fill it up with water, and let that cook. They use great big vats to create their own stocks. And then again, they'll dump all that out and take out all the heavy pieces, the stuff in it, and then they might put that same pot now back on the stove and reduce it even more to concentrate the flavors even more. So, mushrooms, got that? Okay. Yes.
So to put, what's your, about the mushrooms? Okay, so in the grocery store, it's
Uh-huh.
got saran wrap over them. and
Yes.
It's got air pockets in that little.
Yes.
So how do you put it in the refrigerator? Keep that little container?
Well, you can keep the little container. I oftentimes will wrap some more saran around it again and then take a knife and poke holes in it so that it can breathe in there instead of totally maybe wrapping it up and letting it sit in there where then it tends to be slimy and get slimy on you, or putting it in the refrigerator and letting it sit in there with nothing on it and then it wants to shrivel all up and get dry. So that's kind of a tough one with it. Things like in the old days, before we started using plastic, people used a lot of paper bags to store their stuff in refrigerators. And they actually breathe. And so people would buy their mushrooms. That's why sometimes in some markets, you'll see paper bags next to them to put when you're hand picking your mushrooms, and people put them in there and then put those in, because it's a breathable substance. And I will say, I did bring, just to show you guys, these Debbie Meyer green bags, or some other version thereof, they really do work as well because they are breathable materials. they allow, instead of just a regular plastic bag that you're throwing stuff into and cutting off its air supply, and then it's just sitting in there wilting itself. And that's the other thing that I would say. You don't want to start cleaning your vegetables until you're ready to use them. You think you're doing a good thing if you come home and you bought all these vegetables on your market try on Saturday. And so you got everything clean, and now it's all in the refrigerator, so you can just go grab it. And here comes Thursday, and you go in there, and things are looking kind of weird. Well, what you've done when you've cleaned it off like that, you've introduced moisture into the vegetable, and now it's starting to go bad. So leave it in the state you find it from the grocery store, and then when you go to use it, wash it.
So there's this new, I just saw it the other night on Amazon, this new, I'm gonna call it like a nylon bag that has holes in it and everything, with a little drawstring, and you can just literally put that in your vegetables as you pick them up at the grocery store and check out with them. You're not using the plastic.
Sure, you
But
could.
that would be the same thing.
Same type of thing, sure, absolutely.
Can I ask one more
Okay.
question on the mushrooms? If they dry out in
Mhm.
the refrigerator, can you use some of the juice that you've collected to kind of reconstitute?
Yes and no. Yes, you can. You can. It's not something that you would want to then turn around and use in a raw state, like on a salad or something.
But if you're gonna roast
But if you're gonna roast it or you're gonna saute with it, absolutely. It would be fine to go ahead and use, that way. It's not gonna ever get enough moisture back to reconstitute, to put it out on a vegetable tray as a part of your crudité platter or something.
Are the shiitake and oyster mushrooms, you roast them the same way?
Absolutely. Any mushroom, white mushroom, any kind of brown mushroom. Any of the brown mushrooms are going to have more flavor than a straight up white button mushroom. But if white button mushroom's all you got, and if that's what you like, go for it all day long. Nobody's going to beat you over the head for it with it. It's not a problem. Peppers. The only thing I'm trying to show here with peppers, and I kind of go back and forth between things, because as I use items, I can talk to you about items. Knives. Now it comes times here, I'm going to talk to you about knives. There's not a chef in the world that if you told them they were going to be on a desert island and what 5 things could they take, their chef knife would be one of the top items in there. At home, do I have chef knives that are this big? Absolutely. Do I use them? Hardly ever. They don't feel good in my hand. Just because it is a chef's knife doesn't mean it feels good in my hand. Do I spend money on my knives? Yes. I take my knives with me when I travel. It's in my luggage. No, really. I use these little pan things that go over the handles of your pans, and I wrap some plastic around them, and I stick them in here, and I put them in my luggage. Because it doesn't matter where, if I'm going to someone's home, their knives are not going to be my knives.
Your babies.
Absolutely. And I like these knives. These fit my hand. I can do anything. I can make them move. I can make them do. And I will tell you, the biggest mistake that most people make is that their knives are dull. Folks, keep your knives sharp. There's nothing worse than being cut by a dull knife. It's a worse cut. And I get cuts all the time. Don't think chefs don't. We get cut all the time. And I like a good clean cut. Now, you know, jagged edge, I don't like the jagged edge stuff. Little thing for you here. At the very least, when you go shopping at Kroger once a month, take your knives with you, wrapped up in a towel, and take them back to the butcher shop and say, I'm here to have my knives sharpened. Kroger, huh?
Kroger won't do it anymore.
Well, I had it done about a month ago at the Kroger on Westport Road. Okay,
They said that, they told me the last time I offered them that the problem was that their liability insurer had real problems with that.
okay. Ask if you know the guy well enough, as I say, the guy at Kroger will do it for me. I haven't done it about a month ago, but I go like once a month and, get my knife sharpened at Kroger. Now, my opinion on that, in general, that's like me going to the car wash at, down in Prospect, where I can vacuum my own car out, and then I go through the machine that's got all these things that's come and does my car. And then you have the thing at the back end that's blowing all the water off for you, okay? So it's partially really good. About once or twice a year, I take my knives to a professional knife sharpening place, which is more like when you take your car to the detail guy and you get things done better. Heimerdinger here in town, and I've got their cards up here in front. They don't pay me for this. I don't get a discount. I don't get a nothing. But it's Shelbyville Road right down at Hubbard's Lane. They do knives, and they sharpen knives, and I just had these done the other day there. And you go in and you say to little Mr. Carl Heimerdinger, "I'm Mr. Heimerdinger, I'm here again with my knives. And how long is it taking these days to get them done?" "Oh, it's taking about a week or 10 days to get them done." "I need them for Saturday, I'm doing a demo." "Well, I can get them for you on Friday, but it's gonna cost you an extra $5. "Okay." But the fact is that you get great knives, well sharpened, also straightened. Most people don't realize that your knives are not in alignment much anymore. And that's because you have chopped on them, on your boards or whatever you're using, or on the, God forbid, right on your countertops. And then you pick up your board and you use your knife blade to push everything into something. And you bend your knives when you do that. You also make them go dull when you do that. Do I do it? Of course I do. I'm a normal person, I think. So I do it too. Better way that all of us should do it, just flip your knife over to the thicker side and use it if you're gonna do that, so that you can save your knife blade for a longer period of time, particularly when you've spent the money at Heimerdinger's to have them sharpened. And Kroger does it for free if you can find them to do it. But, you know, you just wanna keep your knives in good shape. All right, so peppers. When I go to roast these, I simply cut the tops off and then put my fingers in and pull the stuff out of the center. And I don't throw this away. A lot of people I know will cut the top off and they just throw that whole thing away. Again, I've worked in a restaurant. Food costs, folks. You need to be able to use every bit of every piece of product that comes into your restaurant. You can't be throwing stuff away. Because the cost of your food, if you all want to still only have to pay, you know, $26 for that entree instead of $46 for that entree, or whatever it is, so they get used. I find for me, if I'm making a salad or something, I dice them to whatever size I want. But when I'm gonna go roast them, I just simply cut them into strips that are roughly the same size. And I'll start typically with the top piece of it, and then I'll cut the pepper in half. Somewhere along the way, I cut the little pieces out of it. And then I'll cut my ends. I mean, it's just a question of cutting stuff. You spend time doing it. And then I cut my strips. However thick you want to do them, thin you want to do them, whatever you want to do. And oftentimes I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do with this on the back end? I'll lay them all out in the pan. And I'll typically do a red, a yellow, an orange, maybe a green. Green's not my favorite. My mother hates it, so if I'm doing anything, it's going to be for her. I have to pick it out later, so I might as well leave it out. I do them in, and then I will also take an onion, because they roast it roughly the same time.
Can you hold one of those?
Do what?
Can you hold one of the pepper spray?
Oh, sure. I just cut them in length of size of pepper. Thinking about like, that will work for fajitas later in the week. It gives me a little more substance on the plate if I wanted to just have some peppers on the side of something. If I wanted to do it in a stir fry later in the week, these have already been roasted, then I might pull some of these out that I've done already and just take them and quickly give them a quick dice to go into whatever I'm doing for my stir fry and have those be ready to go. So, but if they were already diced and I wanted them long, I can't put them back together. So I start with them long, put all those together on the pan, and onions. Now, people tell you there's certain ways to cut an onion, and there's probably 100 ways to cut an onion. But you have the stem end of the onion and the growing end of the onion. Don't cut the stem end off. Leave the stem end on. Hold it together. Cut the growing end off, and for the most part then, cut the sucker in half. It makes it very easy then to pull off your outside. Now, in this instance, because of what I'm doing here, for roasting purposes, the fact is that these are long strips, so I tend to kind of want to keep long strips as well for my onion. I don't want to put them in a little dice, because if I do, they're going to burn before my peppers are done. So again, I'm just trying to keep them the same size. What I do is I'll cut my onion, just cut through a little bit. It's not going to fall apart, it'll stay together, because I left the stem end on. And then I just cut them in slices. And toss however many of those I want on my same thing. That's me. You can do onions all by yourself that way. If I were going to dice the onion because I wanted it later on for something else, easy dicing here, folks. The onion they talk about. You just make slits in your onion along the way. You come back through, come back through. And at whatever size of space that you cut between them when you went down will give you whether you have a small dice or a bigger dice. So then you have your diced onion for whatever you're going to use it for. Yes, ma'am?
How do you keep from crying when you slice them? Really? Is there a trick?
No.
Okay.
No, there isn't. There really isn't.
I think water works. I used to, back in my old
Yeah.
Ponderosa days, I cut up probably 100 pounds of onions a week.
Yeah.
And if I kept the water running, it usually did better.
Water can help. I've heard, people will try putting a pair of glasses on to keep the fume away. I've heard people talk about putting a match in their, not lit. Putting a match because the sulfur on the end of the match is supposed to help. I tend to find that the sweet yellow onions don't get you so much anymore. The white onions, and those are, Mexican food is full of, you'll never see a yellow onion used in Mexican food. They use white onions. And those suckers are tough on you. And they will get you going. And then some red onions can be. Now, I will say, if you've got a strong onion flavor, and this is again just tips from Traci that you get along the way as I do this, that you can help bring down how strong an onion might taste if you will soak it in some ice water. So let's say you were going to use onion in a salad, and you know that Aunt Betty can't, that onions will bring my stomach hurt, or whatever it is, and you want onions in your salad. Take your onions and chop them up in whatever shape size you want them for your salad. Put them in some ice water. and let them sit for about 10 or 15 minutes, drain them out, it will pull out some of that, how strong that they come at you. It will mellow them out some. So just a little tip there.
Does it make it, do you have a preference of whites versus,
I
roasting
tend-
vegetables?
Okay, the least strong onion is a sweet yellow onion. Then you're gonna go to a regular yellow onion. Then you're gonna go to typically a red onion, and then white onions are the strongest. And on the back end of that, you would have green onion leeks close to one another, and then shallots. Or shallot, depending on wherever you're from.
Well, whatever Panera bread uses, it's like a red onion, and they are so strong. I can't eat all of them.
I can't tell you exactly why that happened. I think it's why, just like with those shishito peppers, why one out of every 10 is hot and the other 9 aren't. It's just something as it chemically is growing and doing. One red onion as compared to you put 10 of them out there and you have one that's going to be killed. But if you're doing that and you taste it when you're cutting it, you think, ooh, this is a strong one, go ahead and soak that one in some ice water and it'll help bring that down, and you can go ahead and use it for stuff.
So I'm gonna start saving, taking the onions off the salad from Panera bread and putting them in a container, put them in ice water for now.
Now, I will say, one other way that I will show you that you can cut an onion, and all it tends to typically have to do is with shape and how it holds up on something. We've got dices here, we've got just slices, half-moon slices that can be at whatever size you want those to be on. If you've got your onion that you cut in half, okay, normally we would have set it down so the big end sat down and we're gonna cut our half-moons. You can also cut slivers of onions, and you do that by going through it from the top end. So in that instance, you could cut down. Now, in this, it's more work because you have to cut through things. But you get a different look to your onion when you do this. And again, because of the look, you will sometimes see chefs use these because it's a sturdier, it holds its own better. When you are on one of these kind, that's the half moon, it tends to dissolve more as you're caramelizing it and making onions and start to dissolve itself into, whereas the ones that are more segmented tend to hold their shape and stay longer. So just again, depends on what you're doing with it, as oftentimes what you want, how you want to chop it. Question?
What about roasting garlic?
Well, I hadn't gotten there yet.
Oh,
I got
okay,
it right over here.
Okay, all right, there it is.
I got it right over here.
I love them.
Okay. I know, always just time. All I did here, Roma tomatoes. I took a Roma tomato and I cut it into little wagon wheels, just cut slices. And laid them out on a pan, sprayed some Pam on them, and I used some thyme on those and put them in a slow oven. It's on your sheet, like 300 degrees, because that's a low and slow guy. And it starts drawing out moisture. The outside of it, where the skin is, will crisp up some. The inside will tend to stay a little softer. And so here at that point now, these become lovely garnish on a salad or on a plate. Or if you take whole tomatoes, and let's say you have a bumper crop of Roma tomatoes, you can take these guys, take the seeds out, cut them in half, kind of just use your finger to pull the seeds out of them. Set them up again like little soldiers. Cut side up on this instance on your pan. Now, a chef would use lots of olive oil on these. We, of course, would be panning all of these. A little salt, pepper, again, if you want a spice to do, if you're gonna use these later on and say turn it into sauce, tomato sauce this summer with your bumper crop aroma tomatoes. And throw them again, 300-degree oven. They're gonna cook for like 90 minutes or so till they really concentrate down. And then you'll take them out, let them sit and cool down. You can either, at that point, take the skins off of them yourself, or leave the skins on, whatever you wanna do. Package them all into freezer bags, push the air out of them, store them in the freezer, and you've got tomatoes, roasted tomatoes that you can use then all through the winter when you're making your chili and your soups and stuff. Or you can take them and put them in like a food processor and roar it all up and then throw them in a pan and make sauce from them with a nice roasted tomato in there. Now, some people will tell you, you have to put sugar on them and you have to put balsamic vinegar and you put garlic, you do all that. You can do all those things. I'm not telling you not to do them. That's based on whatever your box is and whatever you are going to do with them on the back end. I tend to, when I'm making things, because I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with it. I don't want to have put a bunch of garlic and basil and balsamic vinegar on my tomato and then I want to make chili with it. Instead of using it to make sauce with or some sort of other Italian type of dish. So if I just leave it as plain as possible with maybe a little salt or pepper or Mrs. Dash or one of the no salt seasoning blends, something like that, then I can decide later what I want to do with it and season it at that time. And that again is just a suggestion. But I did have some roasted tomatoes up here. I didn't. You go back to mushrooms, okay. Yes. No, don't wash them. You pop the stem off of them, take a spoon and take the gills out, the dark gills. Just scrape those out. You get down to the flesh of the mushroom. Then you can stuff them with anything you want. Our mushroom risotto is really good with that. The mushroom risotto, and I'll chop up some artichoke hearts, some of those peppers and onions into it, put those in there. You just mix the risotto with the vegetables in there. I bulk it up. Stick it into the portobello mushroom, put it on a sheet pan, 350 oven for maybe 15-20 minutes. Without a stuffing? Same thing. You could go about, at that point you could go about 400, 425. You're just going to roast them. Now, what I would suggest on that though, I would start with them up because they're going to extrude liquid. So you're going to catch all that liquid on the front end of it. So let's just say we're going to do this for a total of like 15 to 18 minutes, because otherwise it's going to shrivel up too much. So you've got your portobello mushroom, you've taken the gills all out of them, they're on your sheet pan, spray with a little pan so they don't stick. Put them in your 425 oven, pull them out at about 8 minutes. Take them out and drain, turn them upside down. Let that juice go away that's collected in there, and then stick them back in now that way. And let them cook the remaining time face down. Because that way you're going to end up getting them roasting without all that juice sitting in the middle of them there. Okay. All right, squash and zucchini. I have a theory on this. Actually, it was my chef that told me. Again, the concept of if you cut a squash or a zucchini into little rounds, and I'll just do some here. It has all this flesh side that's available to it. So when you go to saute it or roast it or whatever, the skin side, which gives it any structure, is very limited. And it's mostly flesh. So it dissolves to nothing, and it becomes just as if you picked it up and it was cooked. It wasn't like that. It would be all hanging down, and it's mushy, and it's flat on the plate. So I get by that with my squash and zucchini. I cut just the end off of one, end off the other, cut the sucker in half. Then, depending on the size now, so I have two halves. Depending on the size of it, I'm going to cut this in half again. Sometimes I'll cut it in thirds if it's a big one. So I end up with two little kind of triangular pieces. All right. You can just cut these straight across, and you will get pieces that'll still be standing up. I like to, because it's nicer, it's prettier, I cut them on a diamond angle. So I do one angle that way, one angle this way. I move it back and forth. So I end up with pieces that kind of look like this. So that when you roast them, and you put them all on your pan, and you throw them in the oven, and then they come out, you get something that stands up a little more. And again, these are ones that I undercook. I will cook these for about 9 minutes, 10 minutes, pull them out, take them off the sheet pan, put them on the other cold sheet pan, let them cool completely, put them in my containers, and then I've got them for the week in the oven, in the refrigerator. And I can just pull out and in whatever bowl container I want, can heat them up, mix them with some mushrooms, some peppers, whatever I want, and do it that way. Or I can heat them individually, put them back on a roasting pan, back in an oven to get them hot again. Or I can nuke them, whatever I need to do with them. And then I can also season them how I want it to be for whatever vegetable. But you get a little more height on the plate. You've got more skin as part of it, so it now hasn't just become a mush. There's actually some texture, something there left. Just a suggestion. And it works for both the squash and the zucchini. What I'll do with the squash, again, I try to make it easy on myself. So I'll cut it, the part that's all one size, and I'll cut it, and then I come back and I'll cut the crook off that's the smaller part, and then I come back and I'll cut it in half. And do my same, I do the exact same cut style, but I can cut it based on, instead of trying to worry about, oh, here's a thin end and here's a big end, so I can still get things to be roughly the same size. The size matters. I haven't. I don't have one. I've never tried one. I know there's products out on the market that has been done to them, and that you can buy them out there where they pulled all the moisture out of them, the dehydrated beets or this or that, and it's concentrated flavor and the like. I don't know one. I haven't done it. Okay. All right, on to, I'm not going to do anything. I didn't bring in acorn squash, didn't do anything with that. Information's there. Dry vegetables, and again, as we talked about with these wets, you can spray them if you want, put seasoning on them if you want, but you don't have to spray any of those with Pam when you use them, because they already have enough moisture to hold whatever you're putting on them. Asparagus. Thank you. I'm like, where did I put it? Now, trick with asparagus. First of all, when you buy your asparagus, it's inevitable that you get all these ones that are different sizes. And inevitably, you would find them, you know, they come in, oftentimes they'll be in a bunch that has something on it down here and it's all done, and they have them all. And so then oftentimes people will just cut the end, and then they're not the same size because they didn't start them out all together. So I always take mine out of whatever package it's in, whatever rubber band's around it, and I'll lay them out. Now, did my grandmother teach me that you're supposed to take each individual asparagus and feel where it is at its bending point and snap it? Yes, I worked in a kitchen. You don't have time to do that. So what I would do is I lined them up based on the heads, the tips. And then I cut them as long as I want them to be. And I just cut them as long as I want them to be. Can you save the ends of the asparagus? Yes. Can you make stock from them? Yes. Do they make great soup? Yes. Do I do it all the time? Thank you. I only have so much refrigeration. I don't run a mobile kitchen out of my house. So, but can you do those things with them? Absolutely. So you can absolutely do that. Now, trick with asparagus. First of all, I would tell you, all these people that want to tell you that those little tiny thin asparagus are just so wonderful. How do you control cooking those? They might be wonderful if you're going to eat them raw, but that thin, they're so easy to overcook. And I don't like the great big thick ones either, because those do tend to be a bit tougher. I like about a medium size kind of an asparagus. You can control it a little better. Asparagus works well if you're going to steam it, but to roast it, there is a trick. When you heat your oven up to the temperature, 425, 450, whichever one you feel comfortable with using, put your pan in the oven when you're roasting, when you're heating it. Let the pan get hot with the aluminum on. Don't spray any pan, nothing on it. Put the pan in there. Because if you started the asparagus out here, and I had everything lined up, and the oven's on, and everything's cold, and it goes into the oven. Asparagus is so thin, and so much of it is softer material, particularly on the tip, that by the time it starts to get to the temperature of the oven, the ends are going to be mushed before the stems are ever done in there. And they won't have the opportunity to have gained any type, typically, of color to them. To get any kind of color on them, you're going to have had to overcook them. So if you will start with a hot pan, put the pan in the oven, let it heat up. Make sure you put on a glove when you're pulling it out. And if you've washed your asparagus, put it on a towel and just make sure, pat it dry, because we don't want to steam them in there. We want to roast them in there. So you pull this hot pan out, it's on top of your oven, you work quick. You've already got it prepped, ready to go. You then lay them right on your pan, and you will hear them sizzle. You do not need Pam. You don't need anything on the pan. You will hear them start to sizzle. So the heat is already hitting that asparagus on that side. Lay out one side, hear the other. Single rows. If you start doubling that up, the ones on the bottom are steaming. They are not roasting. So make sure they have plenty of room, and if you've got to do it in 2 pans, 3 pans, whatever you have to do to get it in there. Back in the oven, it only takes anywhere from, based on the thickness of the asparagus, anywhere from 6-8 minutes to about 10 or 12 minutes. If you want it crisp tender, or if you want it a little more done. So it's your preference on that, and you have to kind of learn what your oven will do for you and at what level it'll take it. But do anything to it. You can leave it in for the total time. It will get color on one side only, the part that was on the pan side. If you want, halfway through or so, you can open the door, close it real quick again, because you don't want to lose the heat, and just give it a little shake, and stick it back in again. But you end up with beautiful, beautiful asparagus, and at whatever level you want it to be. They're not mush, they're not, you know, they have a bit of a bend to them, but they're not, you know, because I didn't want them, you know, they're not way down. And you can reheat these. Again, you could do it in an oven for 1 or 2 minutes at 450 to take them hot to the table if you did them ahead of time. Or great salad to have on the side, great at room temperature. Whether you're using a yogurt dressing or a raspberry vinaigrette or a balsamic or an old-fashioned, chop some egg up and put it on top of them and a little red onion on there and make them look real pretty. You do. So I've got a bunch of really nice asparagus here, and this is the time of year for it.
Can I confirm?
Yeah.
You said that you make the pan heat first with aluminum foil only, and then add the asparagus, so I'm not panning the
You do
oil?
not have to pan it.
Okay.
Now, if you want, because your asparagus is dry, you can put the asparagus down, but you have to have everything ready now if you're going to do this. This is where I like to use this to come in. And I would pull my pan out. That's what I did with those. I pulled the pan out. I got the asparagus down real quick. I use the spray pump because it gives me a little more on there. And then I use just a little bit of salt.
I was about to say, I was about to salt in front of mine.
But I mean, it was tiny. It was tiny. It was tiny. It was just tiny. And, you know,
Salt, not Evo.
I know Evo. No, it's the chef in me. I can't help it. So anyway, asparagus. Beets. All right. This is fun. If you have not had fresh beets before, or you've only had them in a can, or you've only had them at the salad bar somewhere, please come up here afterwards. And anybody can come up here afterwards and try any of these things. That's why they're here. Beet greens, if you like beet greens, these can be eaten. They're edible. I'm not a big beet green fan. I just cut mine off and I throw them away. But I know people that would kill for beet greens. And again, you treat them like spinach. They cut them off, they throw them in a pan, just like they would do with spinach and kale. You can saute them, so you can use them. But you either can find beets in the store that don't have a top to them, they've already been cut off, you don't have to do anything. Or if you get them and they're like this, you can either use a pair of scissors or a knife and you cut the top off. Then what I do is I just take a piece, I'll run them under water and I just wash kind of slightly the outside of these. I did one this morning so that I could show you all this. I just take a piece of foil and I will put 3 or 4 beets that are the same size in one piece of foil. If I've got one mumbo jumbo one that's real big and the other ones are about the same size, I'll put it by itself in a piece of foil. I try and do them by size. And all I do is take the foil, you run it under water in there and close the foil around them. 425-degree oven. 45 minutes to an hour, might be an hour and 10 minutes if it's a great big beet. You don't have to do anything, don't touch them. If it's a smaller little beet, go 45 minutes. If they're medium-sized beets, just go an hour. Take them out, kind of open your foil a little bit, just let the steam out enough so that and let them cool off so that you can handle them, okay? You simply take them, put on a pair of gloves. I use a lot of gloves at my house. It's in they're in the utility aisle at the Kroger, where you buy the Swiffers and everything. And you just simply, the skin comes right off. ready to go. Ready to go. And I stick them in a plastic bag and I put them in the refrigerator. I now can take beets out anytime during the week. I can slice them, I can dice them, I can do whatever I want. I can heat them up on the stove. It's a great thing. And they're really, really easy. And don't worry about trying to peel them ahead of time, any of that. Whole in soil.
How long will they keep in the refrigerator?
Week 10 days. Now, they will extrude liquid as they sit in there. They will get liquid in here. All you have to do is take them out, run them under water. And the other thing I would tell you, if you're ever going to cook beets with things, remember the beets will change the color of whatever you're putting it with. So, if you think you're going to toss butternut squash with a beet, the minute they touch your orange is going to become red. So, just remember that and do everything else first, and then you almost have to place your beets in there to really get it to be photographic. Because otherwise it'll just be, the beets will stain everything.
Also, if you slice that beet,
Uh-huh.
try to slice it, it's gonna bleed out, you'll lose your color.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, as I say, they couldn't be any easier to do. And I used to have students in culinary school, and I would do beets, particularly I taught international cuisine. And so I get to German. That's where I do it, was a German class. And we would do pickled beets and beet salads and all these things. We do Eastern European, and we get to borscht and making soup and all. And I had students that had never had a beet before. And I used to tell them, you're getting a 0 on the day if you don't try it. And they would look at me, oh, chef, I can't, I'm gonna get sick. Just try it. If you've never had a fresh beet, it is so different than what's in a can or what's pickled or what is on your salad bar that you just won't believe it.
You got red all over your face.
Well, shoot. Don't.
You're bleeding out.
Did I get it or am I still red?
You got it.
I got most of it. Okay. Change gloves.
Your pickling spice,
Do what?
your pickling spice, can you put it in the bag with them?
Not at that point, you can't. What you have to do, because I have done that, I pickle them as well. I'll make pickle beets. I take my pickling spice later, after I have roasted the beets, and then I will cut the beets in like I chunk them. I tend to chunk them at that point, and I put the pickling spice on the stove with vinegar and water, sugar. But I'm making them for my parents. They're not for me. It's my mom wants them. No, I don't eat them, but she does. I mean, I love beets. Don't get me wrong, but well, I use Splenda, so. And I heat the pickling spice up and put the beets into the warm liquid, and then take it off the stove and let them sit in that, and infuse back into it. Put them in a glass jar or a glass container that has a lid, and stick them in the refrigerator. There's some at their house right now.
Plastic versus glass?
For storage of that, I use glass, because plastic would stain. It has a plastic top, but it is a glass container. Broccolini, I did some of that. It's baby broccoli. Didn't want to hold up pretty well. Yeah. Kroger on Westport Road had it yesterday, and Trader Joe's had it earlier in the week. I bought some from both. And the Trader Joe's had much thinner stems, so I cooked those separate on one pan. The ones from Kroger had much thicker stems. I cut those in half and put those on the sheet pan. In the oven, 425, was 12 minutes. And they came out crisp on the ends, really, really crisp. They would be great with some lemon, with some garlic on them. I mean, just really wonderful. I've got some here again for people to try if you would like. I've put nothing on them. So, I mean, there's nothing on these, because I just didn't when I did them. But this makes a great side dish to work from. There's the Brussels sprouts. The biggest tip I can tell you on Brussels sprouts, in every bag that you buy, you find every size that's available. Okay, so how do you, if we talk about the fact that you want your Brussels sprouts to try and go at the same temperature or cook at the same time, the outside of your pan cooks faster than the inside of your pan. So it's your placement of where you put them. So again, I cut the ends, the stem end off. And when I'm buying Brussels sprouts, I look at the package in the store. I'm looking at it. If it's got a really, really dark end on the end of it, and I don't consider this a really, really dark end on the end of it, I don't buy them. That means they've been off the stem too long. Those suckers are old. You want them to be as close to white or just turning brownish as you can find. And you know, and if they're starting to turn black on the ends of them, don't buy them. They're not going to be any good.
So the ones that you find in a whole stem are the best ones?
Those are the best ones to use because you're actually going to cut them off yourself. They're going to be nice and white, but you only find those a couple times a year to do. But I cut the ends off of them. I pull any loose or discolored or issue with the Brussels sprout on it, on there. Now, if there was nothing wrong with it, I put those right on the pan as well because then you get real crispy little ones in there. But I always cut mine in half when I'm doing them. So a bigger one goes on the outside of the pan. The little ones go on the inside of the pan. And I line them all up. They're little soldiers. And they're dry vegetable, so I spray them with Pam when I get through with them and get them all on there. Again, I like the 21 seasoning blend from Trader Joe's on them. But whatever you like, if you want anything at all, into the oven. I go about 20 minutes on them, pull them out, and then I do the same thing that I did before. And I turn, like the artichoke part, I turn each one of them over. And then I put them back in. Yes, but I end up with really pretty Brussels sprouts when I do it that way.
20 minutes both sides?
About 20 minutes both sides. 425. And Brussels sprouts, of course, you can do them ahead of time. They reheat beautifully. They hold. They're really, they're great. And one of my favorite things with them is balsamic glaze over them. Ooh, it's really wonderful on them. Balsamic glaze. It's in with all the vinegars. You can make your own, but it's cheaper to buy it than make it. Because you buy a bottle of balsamic vinegar and you put it on in a pan on the stove and you turn it on and you let it cook till it reduces down and becomes this thick syrup, and you get this little tiny amount for the $6 you bought, and this costs $3.99. So you know it's cheaper to buy than make it. Cabbage. Again, all I did here was take a cabbage, cut it into slices, cut it in half, cut it into slices, lay it flat on a pan. In this instance, I happen to really like caraway seeds with mine. So I laid them flat on the pan, sprayed Pam on it, put some caraway seeds on there, cooked them for like 15 minutes, flip them over, put them back in for 15 minutes. Done. So cabbage makes a great roasted vegetable, and it works really, really well. You can use any kind of seasoning you like. I just tend to always think, caraway and cabbage, and I'm German, I guess, so.
Do you ever, I remember doing this long time ago, just cut like slices, make like treat it like a piece of meat, and just slice the cabbage and then roast it?
Well, that's what, I mean, if you take this and you slice, that's exactly. I did them as slices in here, so that I ended up with pieces. Of course, I had a few. So they were pieces that started out on the pan like this. Mhm. Fennel. If you have not gotten fennel, you can find it in the marketplace with big long stems on it. All you do is cut those off. I will tell you that Trader Joe's has the best deal on them. You get 2 in a package instead of the little ones that you find at Kroger that are like organic for $4 or something. For like $2.99 or $2.69 or something, you get 2 really nice ones at Trader Joe's. And this stuff is so great. I have got a big container of it here. And if you haven't tried fennel, there's plenty of it for you to come in here and try.
I'm coming.
It's wonderful. And all you do, cut the tops, cut this end off of it here. So now you got this bowl. I turn it upside down. Now, you can also just easily cut a little bit of that stem off so you get it back white if it was brown on the end. And I just simply, I put it up here and I do it in slices. Lay them on the sheet pan, spray them with Pam, salt, pepper, 21 seasoning blend, Mrs. Dash, whatever you want to use. Cook them for 15 minutes, flip them over, 15 minutes. And it is, if you have not had fennel, it tastes like licorice when it is, anise or licorice. When it's raw, it sweetens up completely when it is cooked. And again, balsamic glaze is your friend with fennel.
Is that a Trader Joe product? Or can you
This one happens to be Aldi. But Trader Joe's has it, Kroger has it, Aldi had it. I'm not going to do all these green beans, okra, parsnips. They look like carrots. Just so you know what they are. You can leave them whole, unpeeled and slice them. It has plenty of nutrients, just like with carrots. You know, you can leave the skin on a carrot if you want. It's not, if you wash it, it's not going to do anything too loaded with nutrients. But I wanted to bring the parsnips in so you could see them. Green beans, okra, parsnip, radish, okay, spaghetti squash. The only reason I brought this, most people overcook spaghetti squash because you think this spaghetti squash and this spaghetti squash all need to cook for 30 minutes. Or sometimes 45, they'll say. You see a recipe, 400 degrees for 45 minutes. This sucker would be mush. This sucker would be mush. Maybe one of those great big ones that you probably shouldn't be buying anyway, the great big one that doesn't have any taste, might be fine. Something like this little guy, if you were buying this and you cut it in half and you scoop the seeds out, you put it flat on a pan and you throw it in a 425 degree oven, in about 15 minutes is ready to go.
That size.
This one. This one would take about 20-25 minutes. It's based on the size of the squash, not just because it says it takes 45 minutes or half an hour or somebody suggests. Please go by the size, by the individual product you have.
How do you not cut your hand off when you're trying to cut it?
You can take it and throw it in the microwave for a minute. It will soften it up enough so that you can get a knife into it.
Do you have to pierce it?
Now,
Microwave?
oh, not if you're going to just do it for a minute. Not if you're just doing it to make it soft enough for you to slice.
How do you determine when they're ready to be cooked?
When they're what?
Ready to be cooked for right spaghetti squash? How do you think about this?
I just buy them in the store. I have found that any of them are good. I've not ever found that to be the case. I've never had an issue with that, per se. Not that I can think of at all.
What was the question?
How do you know how to select a good squash?
I do have a couple things here, real quick, that aren't necessarily in there. I roasted some romaine. The big thing here that a lot of people did over the course of the last couple of years, they grilled romaine for salads. If you don't want to go outside, you can roast it.
On my George Foreman.
Yeah, well, all I did was take a romaine heart, cut the sucker in half, straight up on a sheet pan, 425 for about 10 minutes. I put some of that 21 seasoning blend on it. Now, I did these yesterday. There's 4 of them in here. But if you did them and took them out, and so, I mean, they're a little wilty-ish right now, but what a great salad that we made last night, yeah. So that works. And then we've got turnips, which again, the biggest thing I can tell you about turnips is the bigger they are doesn't mean they're the best. The smaller they are, the better they are. They get real fibrous when they get big. And you have to use a peeler on them and peel the skin off. And I would tell you, don't cut the ends off, or I say it back, cut the ends off before you start peeling them because they're slick once you peel them. And it's hard to hold on to them and do. But the smaller they are, the better they are. And 2 other quick ones I did. Baby bok choy. Again, cut in half, straight down on the pan. You can spray it if you want. It was about 10 minutes, and these were lovely. Came up ready to go. And then corn, and you can do it 2 ways. Either husk it and put it straight on the rack in the oven, right on your rack. If you do that, it will caramelize and get real pretty, but it'll also dry out. It gets more dry. But you can take your ear of corn and just use a knife and cut the silk off the top. Maybe pull a few of the outside leaves off. And again, right on the rack in the oven. And it's got listed in there the temperature and time. And you will end up with really, really good, the end of that came off. Ready to go corn. So you can roast your corn as well. I think that's about everything. What you have in here, your packets, after this, is just my guide that I put together of ethnic spice blends. So if you wanted to be able to do German food or Italian food or Mexican cuisine, I've told you what are the spices that are used in those places. So you can put the spices together on whatever you're doing and create that. There's a whole bunch of no salt spice blends in here. And this has been updated. If you already have this somewhere in your packets, because it's been around for a couple of years, but I added like a smoky spice rub, I added a jerk seasoning, I added an onion soup mix, homemade onion soup mix that's lower sodium, or I did fine herbs, an adobo seasoning. So all of those are in there for you to use. And then these recipes on the back end, guys, are all just simply some ones for vegetables that just give you something different you can try. There's a lemony Brussels sprout, ratatouille, roasted ratatouille, bunch of vegetables in here that get done for ratatouille. Cauliflower fried rice. How to do that in a saute. So I've just thrown this whole cauliflower is on there. That did that this morning. 450 degrees, 30 minutes, took it out, turned it back in.
Is there any spices or anything?
There is nothing but 21 seasoning blend on there.
What is that?
Now, pardon?
21
Oh, that's a Trader Joe's blend. Now, the recipe in here gives you a lemon caper sauce to put over it that you can do. That's you can do it either yogurt based or chicken broth based to do. That would be on that. But there's a whole roasted cauliflower.
some roasted vegetable handouts that I put together 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And I was a novice. Would you mind redoing that for us?
Sure.
And we'll scan it in, put that as part of our phase one binder. And we'll update all of our spices, et cetera, and add it to our binders as well. So thank you so much. You are amazing.
Yeah.
Can I get one more minute?
Yes, yes.
I'm gonna give you one more minute, because I rub garlic, roasting garlic. You can do this, no oil, okay? I've got 3 heads of it up here that I did yesterday. Okay, all you do is now, make sure you buy garlic heads that look like the cloves at least all somewhat match each other on the top versus little cloves down here and big cloves. So at least take a good look at your garlic, okay? All you do is take a knife and cut a good chunk off the top so that you expose all the pieces. Take a piece of foil, sit it in the piece of foil, spray it with some Pam. That's it. If you want to salt it, if you want to pepper it, if you want to put thyme, if you want to do anything else, you can. But put it in the foil, wrap the foil up, stick it in an oven. It's on your sheets, I think. And you go for, it's like 30 minutes. And you can freeze these. I take them, I do them, and so at this point now you've got roasted garlic, which you can push out to get your pieces to now flavor your mashed potatoes, use it in salad dressings. You're not eating bread anymore, but you could put it on a baguette. But you know, to get roasted garlics, to have and do. And as I say, once you've roasted these, take them and individually wrap them in plastic wrap, put them in a plastic bag, and stick them in the freezer. You could pull them out and use them later in your soups, in your stews, in your sautés, in things you're making.
I just have a question about kids,
$4.25.
that garlic. You know where they say cook with 8 cloves of
Yes.
garlic? It's just one of
That's
those.
one.
Uh-huh.
It's a head. This is a head.
And
A
those are the
clove is one piece of that.
And that's pretty potent, just the one. So most recipes call for 1 clove.
And they're trying, yes, and they're assuming that that is like a medium clove, but you look in there and you get very big cloves, medium, little cloves. I think garlic is a personal preference. You learn to know how much you like.
More is better.
I do too, I agree, more is better. So anybody can come up here, taste, try, cut, you know, whatever, so.
Okay, I have a few announcements. Tracy is going to do a number of these over the course of the year, and they're all going to be taped. Your health educator will send you links, but of course, come to them, because then you can stay and taste and ask Tracy questions.
And as you can see, we have plenty of room.
Yeah, so sorry for the scare tactic. I really thought we were going to be in here like sardines. I have some door prizes. So if you can feel around under your chair, there shouldn't be any wads of gum under there. If you have a piece of a sticky note under it, anybody find one? Okay, I'll keep them all.
I did that at
Okay.
4:25, and it was like 10 minutes. It was nothing, 9 minutes.
Okay, so I only one sticky note so far.
You're welcome to come.
If you have a sticky